Ready, Joe? Joe? Subcommittee will come to order. Today we meet to present and discuss the Seapower and projection forces marked to the subcommittee. I'm pleased with everything that the members and staff of this subcommittee have done to make this mark successful. I truly believe that this is the most bipartisan subcommittee of the most bipartisan committee in Congress, and I'm particularly pleased with the support and dedication of my ranking member, Joe Courtney of Connecticut. When I talk about national defense, the threats we face, and the capability and capacity of our armed forces, I often talk about trend lines. For many years, those lines have been heading in the wrong direction, but I think with this mark in particular, we are starting to bend those curve lines in the right direction. Although in recent months we have heard talk of a trade-off between the capability and capacity of our Navy, I firmly believe that's a false choice and that the indisputable reality is that we need more of both. This mark, I'm pleased to say, provides that. Between shipbuilding and the National Sea-Based Deterrence Fund, this mark authorizes a total of $20.6 billion for shipbuilding programs. That's $2.3 billion more than what the President requested for this fiscal year, and it's the largest amount that Congress has authorized for shipbuilding since the end of the Cold War. With that funding, we are building the 7 ships requested in the President's budget, along with 3 more. These additions include 1 Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, 1 amphibious ship, and 1 littoral combat ship, along with a number of landing craft. This mark also fully funds the construction of destroyers, LCS, carriers, amphibs, and attack submarines requested in the President's budget, and increases investment in new combat systems and munitions. While adding new forces to the fleet, we are also preventing the administration from inactivating half of the Navy's cruisers and deactivating 1 of 10 carrier air wings. I think it's important to note that in close cooperation with the rest of the committee, we are not just prohibiting divestment of this force structure, but also providing the Navy with the additional O&M and manpower funding it needs to keep it operational. We need to prevent our force from shrinking, but we also need to prevent it from being hollowed out, and I'm pleased that this subcommittee is doing both. By increasing new construction and retaining existing force structure, I believe we're taking the first steps towards the 350-ship Navy that our country truly needs for national defense. While I'm pleased to see the top line for defense moving in a positive direction, I believe we must also work to make the most of every dollar available to us. I believe this mark does that by authorizing bulk purchases, maintaining steady production rates, and achieving economies of scale. I'm pleased that we are authorizing the advanced procurement and block buy of components for 2 aircraft carriers, CVN 80 and 81. I'm also pleased that in this year's mark, we are transferring the first funds for the procurement of Ohio replacement submarines into the National Sea-Based Deterrence Fund, a fund that this subcommittee has given special authorities that could reduce the cost of this vital program by billions of dollars. I'm also pleased that rather than resting on its laurels, this subcommittee is going further in this mark by adding yet another cost-saving authority to the NSBDF in the form of Continuous Production Authority. With regards to the Air Force, this mark supports the modernization and recapitalization of our aging aerial refueling bomber forces. Specifically, the mark continues investments in the KC-46A and B-21 bomber programs. These programs are critical enablers of our nation's ability to project power around the globe. While these programs have had some execution challenges this year, I believe that we are moving in the right direction and remain steadfast in support of both programs. With regards to airlift, this mark supports the modernization and recapitalization of the tactical mobility fleet. This mark fully supports the C-130H AMP increments 1 and 2, as well as propulsion system and propeller upgrades that will ensure the viability of Air National Guard and reserve aircraft through 2040. Lastly, this mark accelerates recapitalization by funding additional C-130J and C-40 aircraft on the service's unfunded requirements list. Overall, I think that this mark moves America's Seapower and projection forces in the right direction, and I'd urge the members of this committee and the rest of the House to support it. The Chair will now recognize Mr. Courtney, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for any opening comments he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd just again like to underscore the opening remarks about the bipartisan work of this committee, which again I can attest to as ranking member, and note that we got here not as a wish list, but really building from the ground up with a lot of input from the combatant commanders, the outside voices and experts, whether it was Admiral Stavridis and others who, again, really made the case that the president's budget needed to be built on in terms of additional items and input from members, which also was quite strong. I also want to salute the staff. I also often say it's hard for me sometimes to remember who's on the majority staff and minority staff on armed services because they work together so well. Dave Sinicki, Phil McNaughton, and Bruce Johnson, again, thank you for your hard work in terms of, listening to all the hundreds, if not thousands, of member requests that came in and getting us a product that we can report out, I think, very successfully today. I'm not going to really go through what Randy just went through in terms of itemizing the different components. I would like to just sort of highlight one area, which is the, again, Admiral Harris and General Breedlove, when they came before the committee, did talk very powerfully and without prompting about the undersea challenges that have, I think, caught even our intelligence estimates off guard in terms of the level of activity in Asia Pacific and North Atlantic. And when you put that testimony in the context of what's going to be happening to the fleet size over the next number of years, we have a serious challenge before us. I think the committee mark, which directs the Navy to provide us with a full assessment of the ability of the industrial base to sustain the current two-a-year build rate, not just up through 2021, but also through the 2020s. Anyone seeing the Navy's shipbuilding plan knows that that's what's really sort of compounding this decline in terms of the numbers in the submarine fleet. So what this mark does is it really tries to mitigate that decrease that's going to happen with the report language and the directive that's going to the Navy. The other item that I think is so significant, and Randy alluded to this, is that giving the Sea-Based Deterrence Fund additional authorities, the continuous production, is a really incredibly significant move by this subcommittee. And I say that because Assistant Secretary Stackley sent over the Navy's analysis of the Sea-Based Deterrence Fund just a couple days ago and really sort of walked through, again, the savings that we've already created with the authorities we gave in the last couple of years with multi-year authority and incremental funding, but also the continuous production, which Randy referred to. Just that one item alone, as Secretary Stackley indicated, will provide additional savings in the missile components of the Ohio program up to 25%. And we're talking about a program that's going to cost about $80 billion. So, a 25% savings for, a key component of this vessel is just enormous. Again, on top of the $10 billion in savings, which Ron O'Rourke identified in his report last year based on the fund that we enacted in prior years. So, I sort of say this because I think, we know we're probably going to have to defend this issue probably later on in the process. But frankly, I think the arguments have gotten even stronger and more powerful in terms of why this subcommittee's efforts have really, set the course in the right direction. In the Navy's report that came in this week, I think, again, it's just additional ammunition that, this is the way we should go to protect the rest of the fleet by creating a separate fund, but also by using much more creative and imaginative approaches to save the high cost that this program is going to challenge future Congresses with. Lastly, the maritime training ships, which has been sort of my little obsession. Again, we, I think, took the president's budget and created the framework for authorizing a training ship, which is going to help avoid the huge damage that would occur with the commercial maritime workforce if we don't pay attention to that. One of the 50-year-old plus maritime training ships up at SUNY in New York is going offline. That's 36% of the workforce that will basically not be able to train on a ship if we don't replace that. And I think our committee has shown that it looks at the sort of big ticket items, but also it pays attention to the issues that really matter to the whole maritime fleet that our country really needs for all the reasons, excuse me, that Randy set forth. So I strongly endorse this package. And again, I think this is a product that every member on the subcommittee can be justly proud of. And with that, I'll yield back.
Joe, thank you. And I want to echo what Joe said about the wonderful work of our staff, their commitment, dedication, both the subcommittee staff and also the full committee and their work and how they have helped so much. And also to thank all the members. This committee has just so much expertise and commitment. And even though some of the members differ on some issues, their cooperative efforts make this mark possible. So we'll now proceed to mark up H.R. 4909, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017. Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. Copies of our subcommittee mark and directive report language were made available and distributed to member offices on Tuesday. Is there any discussion or questions on the subcommittee mark? If there is none, then the chair lays before the members the text of the subcommittee mark for consideration. Without objection, the mark is open to amendment at any point. Are there any amendments to the subcommittee mark? Gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Will the clerk please pass out the amendment? And without objection, the reading of the amendment will be dispensed with. The chair now recognizes Mr. Byrne for 5 minutes for the purpose of offering and explaining his amendment.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The administration had proposed that we downsize the LCS program from 3 to 2, and the mark already contains the committee's decision to go to 3. But the second part of the administration's proposal was to down select from 2 manufacturers, 2 shipyards, to 1. It's my belief that it's premature for us to authorize that because there's been no study that would show that that's in the best interest of the Navy or the country. This program was just reviewed 2 years ago, and the Navy reaffirmed its commitment to 52 ships and 2 shipyards. And without a study, without anything to show that there should be a change in that, I think it would be premature. It's the last year of this administration. We're going to have a new president and perhaps a new Secretary of Defense in another several months. So I think wisdom is for us to stay the course, maintain the 2 shipyards, and then if a new Secretary of Defense comes in and wants to actually do a study to show that there's some reason for us to down select, then we could consider it at that time. So I would ask the subcommittee to approve my amendment that would only authorize the Navy to go forward with the 2 shipyards.
Is there any
Will the gentleman
discussion
yield?
on the amendment?
Sure.
Was the gentleman yield? Does 2 shipyards mean 2 different classes of LCS, or is it 2 shipyards with the 1 LCS that they decide upon?
Well, I'll go ahead and tell you what the amendment says is none of the funds authorized to be appropriated by this act or otherwise for fiscal year 2017 for the Navy shall be used to select only a single contractor for the construction of the littoral combat ship or any successor frigate-class ship until the Secretary of the Navy certifies to the Congress.
So Bradley, excuse me, Mr. Byrne, I'm just a dumb Marine. So I understand what it says. So does this mean we get 2 LCSs? The same 2, or the Navy down selects to 1 LCS, but they use 2 yards for the industrial base?
You would use 2 shipyards, two separate contractors for the littoral combat ship, and you know there's one version that's being made in Marionette and one in Mobile in my district. There is the plan to go to a frigate in the future, so there could be a different situation. Pardon me? I'm all for that. Right. So I think the belief is at this point in time is that they would have littoral combat ship until we get to the frigate, and the frigates are going to be based upon the platforms that we have right now for littoral combat ships. Okay. So remember, this is for the next fiscal year. We're not ready to get to the frigates yet. But if we ever get to that point, then we'll have to have another discussion at that time about whether we're going to have 1 platform or 2 platforms. But we're not there yet.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is there any further debate on the amendment? If not, the question is on the adoption of the amendment offered by Mr. Burns. So many as in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any further amendments? I now recognize Mr. Hunter, who has an amendment at the desk.
I have no.
Don't have one?
I have no amendment.
Okay, then good.
It's on block, Mr. Chairman.
That's great.
It is great.
Okay. The question now occurs on the adoption.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I have an amendment at the desk. You know what? I take full responsibility. I thought this was on block, actually.
Yeah, that's
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Will the clerk pass out the amendment? Without objection, the reading of the amendment will be dispensed with. The chair now recognizes the very smart Marine from California, Mr. Hunter, for the purpose of explaining his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's pretty simple. It requires the Coast Guard to give requirements for an icebreaker within 10 days after the enactment of this bill. We were going to make the Coast Guard, because the Coast Guard acquisition process is nascent and naive, frankly, compared to the Navy's acquisition process. It takes them a long time and more money to build more simple ships than the Navy has to do. We were going to make them choose a parent design of an icebreaker. That's something that existed out there right now. That was the wrong thing. What we're going to do is give them a very short window. They've been working on this. NOAA has been working on this, the National Academy of Sciences, Science Foundation. Everybody's been working on what the new icebreaker has to look like. So they have 10 days after the enactment of this bill in November or December to tell us what their requirements are for an icebreaker. And then we can start work from there. And that's what the amendment does.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If there is no further debate on the amendment, then the question is on the adoption of the amendment offered by Mr. Hunter. So many as in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Are there any further amendments? Seeing none, the question now occurs on the adoption of the mark as amended. As many as are in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the mark is adopted. Let's see. Sorry. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Hunter, for the purpose of a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the subcommittee report the mark as amended favorably to the full committee.
The question is on the motion of the gentleman from California, Mr. Hunter. So many as are in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. A quorum being present, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Without objection, members have 5 legislative days within which to submit written statements into the record. That's so ordered. I also ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make necessary conforming technical and clerical changes and to remove from the mark as amended provisions that would cause the mark to refer to other committees or would result in additional direct spending or result in an earmark. Without objection, that is so ordered. There being no further legislative business before the subcommittee, this meeting is adjourned.